they'll let you post the Bitcoin as collateral against your house or your mortgage, and you'll be able to I think, refinance your mortgage maybe to 100% loan to value or 120% loan to value by putting the Bitcoin as collateral. Like right now, if you go to some of these banks and you had a $5 million house and you wanted to borrow money, they might say, well, I can loan you 70% or 60%. I'll loan you $3 million against the house at the best interest rate. It used to be 2.5%, by the way. When I told people to take mortgages and buy Bitcoin, Bitcoin was $40,000, and the mortgages were 2.5% interest. I took infinite crap for that, by the way, infinite. Well, so you want to borrow the $3 million. What they would say is, I'll give you a loan for $3 million against the house, or I'll make the mortgage $5 million if you post some securities like Apple stock. If you want to post T-bills or Apple stock or the S&P ETF, they will give you a $5 million mortgage at 2.5% interest. And you could have done that with those institutional grade assets. Imagine a world where you can top up your mortgage with Bitcoin, borrow at 3 or 4 or 5% interest for 10 to 30 years, right? And what's the requirement? The bank's got to custody the Bitcoin. They got to recognize it as an asset that's just as good as Apple stock, just as good as a T-bill. And so I think, we're rippling where we get a couple more improvements on the ETFs. We'll be at 100%. A few years from now, we'll be at 100% in accounting, and people will be comfortable with that. Once the regulators, when they start to repeat what Robert F. Kennedy said yesterday and what Donald Trump said today, which is Bitcoin is digital property, Bitcoin is freedom, Bitcoin is virtuous, we're not going to sell our Bitcoin. When they say that, the banks pay attention. Okay, the banks, you got to look at this as the banks are looking to the regulator. The regulator is looking to the president, the administration. When the president says, this is sketchy stuff, it's used by criminals, the banks take that, and they pay attention. And you know what happens if you don't pay attention? The Signature and Silvergate Bank both actually were very pro-Bitcoin and pro-crypto, and they got out on a limb, and the regulators shut down the two banks, right? And so you can see why banks are conservative. You can see why public companies are conservative. The SEC, the CFTC, the OCC, and the FDIC matter. Political leadership matters. Rhetoric matters. So the words have changed. If Bitcoin is good for America, if it's good for the dollar, if it's good for the country's prosperity, if it's going to grow the economy, if that's the case, we're going to see all of those switches flip. Those all became catalysts. And now you have the 3 planks of institutional adoption. And now I want to make an observation. Citibank is based on National City Bank. And do you guys know the origin of National City Bank? The head of National City Bank was John D. Rockefeller's brother. And National City Bank was the bank set up by John D. Rockefeller because he didn't want to trust his money with J.P. Morgan. And so that happened more than 100 years ago. People that do business with these banks sometimes keep the same bank for 100 years. J.P. Morgan, Citibank, they're more than 100 years old. So a CFO, they want to do business with a bank they trust. And the world that I'm seeing is a world where Google generates $1 billion a month, and they send $1 billion a month to Citibank or J.P. Morgan, and they say, buy $1 billion of Bitcoin. And it's like $1 billion, now it's $2 billion a month. And then Meta sends